Introduction to Stoicism. Stoicism is a school of Hellenistic philosophy that flourished in ancient Greece and ancient Rome. The Stoics believed that the practice of virtue is enough to achieve eudaimonia, a well-lived life. The Stoics identified the path to achieving it with a life spent practicing the four cardinal virtues in everyday life: prudence, fortitude, temperance, and justice, as well as living in accordance with nature. It was founded in the ancient Agora of Athens by Zeno of Citium around 300 BCE. Alongside Aristotle's ethics, the Stoic tradition forms one of the major founding approaches to virtue ethics. The Stoics are especially known for teaching that virtue is the only good for human beings, and that external things, such as health, wealth, and pleasure, are not good or bad in themselves, adiaphora, but have value as material for virtue to act upon. Many Stoics, such as Seneca and Epictetus, emphasized that because virtue is sufficient for happiness, a sage would be emotionally resilient to misfortune. The Stoics also believed that certain destructive emotions resulted from errors of judgment, and people should aim to maintain a will, called prohairesis, that is, in accordance with nature. Because of this, the Stoics thought the best indication of an individual's philosophy was not what a person said, but how the person behaved. To live a good life, one had to understand the rules of the natural order, since they believed everything was rooted in nature. Stoicism flourished throughout the Roman and Greek world until the 3rd century CE, and among its adherents was Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius. It experienced a decline after Christianity became the state religion in the 4th century CE. Since then, it has seen revivals, notably in the Renaissance, as Neo-Stoicism, and in the contemporary era, as Modern Stoicism. The Stoics provided a unified account of the world, constructed from ideals of logic, monistic physics, and naturalistic ethics. Of these, they emphasized ethics as the main focus of human knowledge, although their logical theories were of more interest for later philosophers. Stoicism teaches the development of self-control and fortitude as a means of overcoming destructive emotions. The philosophy holds that becoming a clear and unbiased thinker allows one to understand the universal reason, logos. Stoicism's primary aspect involves improving the individual's ethical and moral well-being. Virtue consists in a will that is in agreement with nature. And this principle also applies to the realm of interpersonal relationships, to be free from anger, envy, and jealousy, and even to accept slaves as equals of others because all are products of nature. The Stoic ethic espouses a deterministic perspective. In regard to those who lack Stoic virtue, Cleanthes once opined that the wicked person is like a dog tied to a cart and compelled to go wherever it goes. A Stoic of virtue, by contrast, would amend one's will to suit the world and remain, in the words of Epictetus, sick and yet happy, in peril and yet happy, dying and yet happy, in exile and happy, in disgrace and happy, thus positing a completely autonomous individual will, and at the same time a universe that is a rigidly deterministic single whole. This viewpoint was later described as classical pantheism, and was adopted by Dutch philosopher Baruch Spinoza. Philosopher Julian Baggini has characterized what constitutes one being a Stoic. To become a Stoic is to endorse the truthfulness of its worldview and accept its prescription for how you ought to live, not just to like how it makes you feel. Baghini asserts that the endorsement of the truthfulness of the Stoic worldview and the tenets for one's behavior that follow from it are central to what it means to be a Stoic. History of Stoicism. The name Stoicism derives from the stoa poikile, or painted porch, a colonnade decorated with mythic and historical battle scenes on the north side of the Agora in Athens, where Zeno of Citium and his followers gathered to discuss their ideas near the end of the 4th century BC. Unlike the Epicureans, Zeno chose to teach his philosophy in a public space. Stoicism was originally known as Zenonism. However, this name was soon dropped, likely because the Stoics did not consider their founders to be perfectly wise and to avoid the risk of the philosophy becoming a cult of personality. Zeno's ideas developed from those of the Cynics, brought to him by Crates of Thebes, whose founding father, Antisthenes, had been a disciple of Socrates. Zeno's most influential successor was Chrysippus, who followed Cleanthes as leader of the school and was responsible for molding what is now called Stoicism. Stoicism became the foremost popular philosophy among the educated elite in the Hellenistic world and the Roman Empire, to the point where, in the words of Gilbert Murray, nearly all the successors of Alexander professed themselves Stoics. Later, Roman Stoics focused on promoting a life in harmony within the universe, within which we are active participants. Scholars usually divide the history of Stoicism into 3 phases: the early Stoa, from Zeno's founding to Antipater; the middle Stoa, including Panatius and Posidonius; and the late Stoa, including Musonius Rufus, Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius. No complete work survived from the first 2 phases of Stoicism. Only Roman texts from the late Stoa survived. Philosophy does not promise to secure anything external for man, otherwise it would be admitting something that lies beyond its proper subject matter. For as the material of the carpenter is wood, and that of statuary bronze, so the subject matter of the art of living is each person's own life, as said Epictetus in Discourses 115.2, Robin Hard Revised Translation. Of all the schools of ancient philosophy, Stoicism made the greatest claim to being utterly systematic. In the view of the Stoics, philosophy is the practice of virtue, and virtue, the highest form of which is utility, is, generally speaking, constructed from ideals of logic, monistic physics, and naturalistic ethics. These 3 ideals constitute virtue, which is necessary for living a well-reasoned life, seeing as they are all parts of a logos, or philosophical discourse, which includes the mind's rational dialogue with itself. Of them, the Stoics emphasized ethics as the main focus of human knowledge, although their logical theories were of more interest for later philosophers. Stoicism teaches the development of self-control as a means of overcoming destructive emotions. The philosophy holds that becoming a clear and unbiased thinker allows one to understand the universal reason, or known as logos. Stoicism's primary aspect involves improving the individual's ethical and moral well-being. Virtue consists in a will that is in agreement with nature. This principle also applies to the realm of interpersonal relationships. To be free from anger, envy, and jealousy, and to accept even slaves as equals of other men, because all men alike are products of nature. The Stoic ethic espouses a deterministic perspective. In regard to those who lack Stoic virtue, Cleanthes once opined that the wicked person is like a dog tied to a cart and compelled to go wherever it goes. A Stoic of virtue by contrast, would amend one's will to suit the world and remain, in the words of Epictetus, sick and yet happy, in peril and yet happy, dying and yet happy, in exile and happy, in disgrace and happy, thus positing a completely autonomous individual will and at the same time a universe that is a rigidly deterministic single whole. This viewpoint was later described as classical pantheism and was adopted by Dutch philosopher Baruch Spinoza. Logic of the Stoicism. Diodorus Cronus, who was one of Zeno's teachers, is considered the philosopher who first introduced and developed an approach to logic now known as propositional logic, which is based on statements or propositions rather than terms, differing greatly from Aristotle's term logic. Later, Chrysippus developed a system that became known as Stoic logic and included a deductive system, Stoic syllogistic, which was considered a rival to Aristotle's syllogistic. New interest in Stoic logic came in the 20th century, when important developments in logic were based on propositional logic. Suzanne Bobzian wrote, "The many close similarities between Chrysippus's philosophical logic and that of Gottlob Frege are especially striking." Bobzian also notes that Chrysippus wrote over 300 books on logic, on virtually any topic logic today concerns itself with, including speech-act theory, sentence analysis, singular and plural expressions, types of predicates, indexicals, existential propositions, sentential connectives, negations, disjunctions, conditionals, logical consequence, valid argument forms, theory of deduction, propositional logic, modal logic, tense logic, epistemic logic, logic of suppositions, logic of imperatives, ambiguity and logical paradoxes. Categories of the Stoicism. The Stoics held that all beings, although not all things, are material. Besides the existing beings, they admitted four incorporeals, asomata: time, place, void, and sayable. They were held to be just subsisting, while such a status was denied to universals. Thus, they accepted Anaxagoras's idea, as did Aristotle, that if an object is hot, it is because some part of a universal heat body had entered the object. But, unlike Aristotle, they extended the idea to cover all chance incidents. Thus, if an object is red, it would be because some part of a universal red body had entered the object. They held that there were four categories: substance, the primary matter, formless substance, ousia, that things are made of. Quality, the way matter is organized to form an individual object. In Stoic physics, a physical ingredient, pneuma, air or breath, which informs the matter. T3. Somehow disposed. Particular characteristics, not present within the object, such as size, shape, action, and posture. Somehow disposed in relation to something. Characteristics related to other phenomena, such as the position of an object within time and space relative to other objects. The Stoics outlined that our own actions, thoughts, and reactions are within our control. The opening paragraph of the Enchiridion states the categories as, "Some things in the world are up to us, while others are not. Up to us are our faculties of judgment, motivation, desire, and aversion. In short, whatever is our own doing. These suggest a space that is up to us or within our power." A simple example of the Stoic categories in use is provided by Jacques Brunschwig. "I am a certain lump of matter, and thereby a substance, an existent, something, and thus far that is all. I am a man, and this individual man that I am and thereby qualified by a common quality and a peculiar one. I am sitting or standing, disposed in a certain way. I am the father of my children, the fellow citizen of my fellow citizens, disposed in a certain way in relation to something else. Epistemology of the Stoicism. The Stoics propounded that knowledge can be attained through the use of reason. Truth can be distinguished from fallacy, even if, in practice, only an approximation can be made. According to the Stoics, the senses constantly receive sensations, pulsations that pass from objects through the senses to the mind, where they leave an impression in the imagination, phantasiae. An impression arising from the mind was called a phantasma. The mind has the ability to judge, synkatathesis, approve or reject, an impression, enabling it to distinguish a true representation of reality from one that is false. Some impressions can be assented to immediately, but others can achieve only varying degrees of hesitant approval, which can be labeled belief or opinion, doxa. It is only through reason that we gain clear comprehension and conviction, catalepsis. Certain and true knowledge, episteme, achievable by the Stoic sage, can be attained only by verifying the conviction with the expertise of one's peers and the collective judgment of humankind. Physics in Stoicism. According to the Stoics, the universe is a material reasoning substance, logos, which was divided into two classes, the active and the passive. The passive substance is matter, which lies sluggish, a substance ready for any use but sure to remain unemployed if no one sets it in motion. The active substance is an intelligent ether or primordial fire, which acts on the passive matter. As Chrysippus once said, the universe itself is God, and the universal outpouring of its soul. It is this same world's guiding principle, operating in mind and reason, together with the common nature of things and the totality that embraces all existence. Then the foreordained might and necessity of the future. Then fire and the principle of ether. Then those elements whose natural state is one of flux and transition, such as water, earth, and air. Then the sun, the moon, the stars, and the universal existence in which all things are contained. Everything is subject to the laws of fate, for the universe acts according to its own nature, and the nature of the passive matter it governs. The souls of humans and animals are emanations from this primordial fire, and are likewise subject to fate, as Marcus Aurelius said, constantly regard the universe as one living being, having one substance and one soul, and observe how all things have reference to one perception, the perception of this one living being, and how all things act with one movement, and how all things are the cooperating causes of all things that exist. Observe, too, the continuous spinning of the thread and the structure of the web. Individual souls are perishable by nature, and can be transmuted and diffused, assuming a fiery nature by being received into the seminal reason, logos spermatikos, of the universe. Since right reason is the foundation of both humanity and the universe. Stoic theology is a fatalistic and naturalistic pantheism. God is never fully transcendent but always immanent and identified with nature. Abrahamic religions personalize God as a world-creating entity, but Stoicism equates God with the totality of the universe. According to Stoic cosmology, which is very similar to the Hindu conception of existence, there is no absolute start to time, as it is considered infinite and cyclic. Similarly, space and the universe have neither start nor end. Rather, they are cyclical. The current universe is a phase in the present cycle, preceded by an infinite number of universes, doomed to be destroyed, ekpyrosis, conflagration, and recreated again, and to be followed by another infinite number of universes. Stoicism considers all existence as cyclical, the cosmos as eternally self-creating and self-destroying. See also eternal return. Stoicism does not posit a beginning or end to the universe. According to the Stoics, the Logos was the active reason, or anima mundi, pervading and animating the entire universe. It was conceived as material and is usually identified with God or nature. The Stoics also referred to the seminal reason, Logos, spermatikos, or the law of generation in the universe, which was the principle of the active reason working in inanimate matter. Humans, too, each possess a portion of the divine Logos, which is the primordial fire and reason that controls and sustains the universe. Ethics in Stoicism. Individual souls are perishable by nature and can be transmuted and diffused, assuming a fiery nature by being received into the seminal reason, Logos spermatikos, of the universe. Since right reason is the foundation of both humanity and the universe, Stoic theology is a fatalistic and naturalistic pantheism. God is never fully transcendent, but always immanent, and identified with nature. Abrahamic religions personalize God as a world-creating entity, but Stoicism equates God with the totality of the universe. According to Stoic cosmology, which is very similar to the Hindu conception of existence, there is no absolute start to time, as it is considered infinite and cyclic. Similarly, space and the universe have neither start nor end. Rather, they are cyclical. The current universe is a phase in the present cycle, preceded by an infinite number of universes, doomed to be destroyed, ekpyrosis, conflagration, and recreated again, and to be followed by another infinite number of universes. Stoicism considers all existence as cyclical, the cosmos as eternally self-creating and self-destroying. See also eternal return. Stoicism does not posit a beginning or end to the universe. According to the Stoics, the Logos was the active reason, or anima mundi, pervading and animating the entire universe. It was conceived as material and is usually identified with God or nature. The Stoics also referred to the seminal reason, Logos, spermatikos, or the law of generation in the universe, which was the principle of the active reason working in inanimate matter. Humans, too, each possess a portion of the divine Logos, which is the primordial fire and reason that controls and sustains the universe. Social philosophy of the Stoicism. A distinctive feature of Stoicism is its cosmopolitanism. According to the Stoics, all people are manifestations of the one universal spirit and should live in brotherly love and readily help one another. In the Discourses, Epictetus comments on man's relationship with the world. Each human being is primarily a citizen of his own commonwealth, but he is also a member of the great city of gods and men, whereof the city political is only a copy. This sentiment echoes that of Diogenes of Sinope, who said, "I am not an Athenian or a Corinthian, but a citizen of the world." They held that external differences such as rank and wealth are of no importance in social relationships. Instead, they advocated the brotherhood of humanity and the natural equality of all human beings. Stoicism became the most influential school of the Greco-Roman world and produced a number of remarkable writers and personalities, such as Cato the Younger and Epictetus. In particular, they were noted for their urging of clemency toward slaves. Seneca exhorted, "Kindly remember that he whom you call your slave sprang from the same stock, is smiled upon by the same skies, and on equal terms with yourself breathes, lives, and dies." Passions in the Stoicism. The Stoics arranged the passions under 4 headings: distress, pleasure, fear, and lust. One report of the Stoic definitions of these passions appears in the treatise On Passions by Chrysippus, trans. Long and Sedley, P.G. 411, modified. Distress, lupe. Distress is an irrational contraction, or a fresh opinion that something bad is present, at which people think it right to be depressed. Fear, phobos. Fear is an irrational aversion or avoidance of an expected danger. Lust, epithumia. Lust is an irrational desire or pursuit of an expected good, but in reality, bad. Delight, hedon. Delight is an irrational swelling or a fresh opinion that something good is present, at which people think it right to be elated. 2 of these passions, distress and delight, refer to emotions currently present, and 2 of these, fear and lust, refer to emotions directed at the future. Thus, there are just 2 states directed at the prospect of good and evil, but subdivided, as to whether they are present or future. Numerous subdivisions of the same class were brought under the head of the separate passions. Distress, envy, rivalry, jealousy, compassion, anxiety, mourning, sadness, troubling, grief, lamenting, depression, vexation, despondency, fear, sluggishness, shame, fright, timidity, consternation, pusillanimity, bewilderment, and faint-heartedness, lust, anger, rage, hatred, enmity, wrath, greed, and longing, delight, malice, rapture, and ostentation. The wise person, sophos, is someone who is free from the passions, apatheia. Instead, the sage experiences good feelings, eupatheia, which are clear-headed. These emotional impulses are not excessive, but nor are they diminished emotions. Instead, they are the correct rational emotions. The Stoics listed the good feelings under the headings of joy, chara, wish, boulesis, and caution, eulabeia. Thus, if something is present which is a genuine good, then the wise person experiences an uplift in the soul, joy, chara. The Stoics also subdivided the good feelings: joy, enjoyment, cheerfulness, good spirits; wish, good intent, goodwill, welcoming, cherishing love; caution, moral shame, reverence. Suicide for the Stoics. The Stoics accepted that suicide was permissible for the wise person in circumstances that might prevent them from living a virtuous life, such as if they fell victim to severe pain or disease. But otherwise, suicide would usually be seen as a rejection of one's social duty. For example, Plutarch reports that accepting life under tyranny would have compromised Cato's self-consistency, Constantia, as a Stoic, and impaired his freedom to make the honorable moral choices. Legacy of the Stoicism. Neoplatonism, Plotinus. Criticized both Aristotle's categories and those of the Stoics. His student Porphyry, however, defended Aristotle's scheme. He justified this by arguing that they be interpreted strictly as expressions, rather than as metaphysical realities. The approach can be justified, at least in part, by Aristotle's own words in the categories. Boethius's acceptance of Porphyry's interpretation led to their being accepted by scholastic philosophy. Christianity. The fathers of the Church regarded Stoicism as a pagan philosophy. Nonetheless, early Christian writers used some of the central philosophical concepts of Stoicism. Examples include the terms logos, virtue, spirit, and conscience. Like Stoicism, Christianity asserts an inner freedom in the face of the external world, a belief in human kinship with nature or God, a sense of the innate depravity, or persistent evil of humankind, and the futility and temporary nature of worldly possessions and attachments. Both encourage ascesis with respect to the passions and inferior emotions, such as lust and envy, so that the higher possibilities of one's humanity can be awakened and developed. Stoic influence can also be seen in the works of Ambrose of Milan, Marcus Minucius Felix, and Tertullian. Modern Stoicism. The fathers of the Church regarded Stoicism as a pagan philosophy. Nonetheless, early Christian writers used some of the central philosophical concepts of Stoicism. Examples include the terms logos, virtue, spirit, and conscience. Like Stoicism, Christianity asserts an inner freedom in the face of the external world, a belief in human kinship with nature or God, a sense of the innate depravity or persistent evil of humankind, and the futility and temporary nature of worldly possessions and attachments. Both encourage ascesis with respect to the passions and inferior emotions, such as lust and envy, so that the higher possibilities of one's humanity can be awakened and developed. Stoic influence can also be seen in the works of Ambrose of Milan, Marcus Minucius Felix, and Tertullian. Stoicism today in psychology, psychotherapy, and psychiatry. Stoic philosophy was the original philosophical inspiration for modern cognitive psychotherapy, particularly as mediated by Albert Ellis's Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy, REBT, the major precursor of CBT. The original cognitive therapy treatment manual for depression by Aaron T. Beck et al. States, "The philosophical origins of cognitive therapy can be traced back to the Stoic philosophers." A well-known quotation from Enchiridion of Epictetus was taught to most clients during the initial session of traditional REBT by Ellis and his followers. "It's not the events that upset us, but our judgments about the events." This subsequently became a common element in the socialization phase of many other approaches to CBT. The question of Stoicism's influence on modern psychotherapy, particularly REBT and CBT, was described in detail in The Philosophy of Cognitive Behavioral Therapy by Donald Robertson. Several early 20th century psychotherapists were influenced by Stoicism, most notably the Rational Persuasion School, founded by the Swiss neurologist and psychotherapist Paul Dubois, who drew heavily on Stoicism in his clinical work and encouraged his clients to study passages from Seneca the Younger as homework assignments. Similarities of modern Stoicism and third-wave CBT have been suggested as well, and individual reports of its potency in treating depression have been published. There has also been interest in applying the tenets of ancient Stoicism to the human origin story, environmental education, vegetarianism, and the modern challenges of sustainable development, material consumption, and consumerism. Seamus McSwibney has described the practices of spiritual exercises as influencing those of reflective practice. Many parallels between Stoic spiritual exercises and modern cognitive behavioral therapy have been identified. According to philosopher Pierre Hadot, philosophy for a Stoic is not just a set of beliefs or ethical claims. It is a way of life involving constant practice and training, or ascesis, an active process of constant practice and self-reminder. Epictetus in his discourses distinguished between three types of act: judgment, desire, and inclination, which Hadot identifies these three acts with logic, physics, and ethics respectively. Hadot writes that in the Meditations, each maxim develops either one of these very characteristic topoi, i.e. acts, or two of them or three of them. Here's a story about three of the most famous Stoic philosophers, Epictetus, Seneca, and Marcus Aurelius, illustrating their resilience and wisdom in the face of adversity. Epictetus, the slave who found freedom born into slavery in the Roman Empire, Epictetus had little control over his fate. His master, Epaphroditus, was a high-ranking official under Emperor Nero and was known for his cruelty. According to legend, one day, as a twisted act of punishment, Epaphroditus twisted Epictetus's leg with brutal force. Instead of crying out in pain or cursing his fate, Epictetus calmly said, "If you continue, you will break my leg." His master did not stop, and the leg snapped. In response, Epictetus simply said, "I told you so." Rather than dwelling on his suffering, he accepted it as something outside his control. Once freed, he became a philosopher and taught that true freedom is not of the body but of the mind. His students, including Emperor Marcus Aurelius centuries later, learned from his wisdom recorded in the Discourses and Enchiridion. Seneca, the statesman who faced death with dignity. Seneca was a brilliant writer and philosopher, but he also served as an advisor to the erratic and dangerous Emperor Nero. Despite his attempts to guide the young emperor toward reason, Nero became increasingly paranoid and tyrannical. Eventually, Seneca was accused of conspiracy against Nero, a charge likely false but inevitable in such dangerous political times. Knowing he had no hope of survival, Seneca was ordered to take his own life. Rather than despair, Seneca embraced death with the calm detachment of a Stoic. He comforted his grieving friends and slowly opened his veins, speaking words of wisdom, even as life drained from him. When the bleeding was slow, he drank poison. When that too failed, he entered a warm bath to quicken his death. His final act embodied Stoic ideals: courage, acceptance, and inner peace in the face of inevitable fate. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor who wrote in the dark while Seneca had to deal with Nero, Marcus Aurelius ruled as emperor himself, facing war, betrayal, and a devastating plague that killed millions across the Roman Empire. Despite the immense pressures of ruling, Marcus found solace in philosophy. Every night, he wrote private reflections to remind himself to remain humble, rational, and in control of his emotions. These writings, later compiled as Meditations, contained thoughts like, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Even as he lost friends, faced rebellion, and watched his empire struggle, Marcus Aurelius did not seek comfort in luxury or revenge. He continued his duty with discipline, focusing only on what he could control: his actions, his thoughts, and his moral integrity. Conclusion of the video: Stoicism is an ancient Greek philosophy that teaches the development of self-control, resilience, and virtue as a means to achieve a tranquil and fulfilling life. It emphasizes accepting what is outside our control, while focusing on how we respond to events with wisdom and rationality. The philosophy encourages discipline, mindfulness, and aligning one's actions with nature and reason. To enjoy this style of life, focus only on what you can control, your thoughts, actions, and accept what you cannot, external events, other people's actions. Embrace life as it comes, accepting both good and bad as necessary parts of the whole. Believe that living a virtuous life, wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance leads to true happiness. Reflecting on mortality helps in appreciating life and focusing on what truly matters. Act in harmony with reason, reality, and the natural order. Stoicism remains relevant today, influencing modern self-improvement, cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and personal resilience strategies. Though separated by class and time, Epictetus, Seneca, and Marcus Aurelius all demonstrated the core of Stoicism: resilience in suffering, acceptance of fate, and the pursuit of virtue. Their stories continue to inspire people today, reminding us that while we cannot control what happens to us, we can always control how we respond. Which of these stories speaks to you the most? Remember to subscribe to this channel, like the video, share with someone who is important to you, and apply the acquired knowledge in your personal life. Stay safe and listen to more of life motivation.